Ethan Cole was scrolling through his phone when he stumbled on the personal page of a foreign esports coach. He just posted a new video. The title was pure clickbait. Unbelievable. This girl flew across the world and gave me everything on our first date. Ethan clicked. In the video, the coach and a girl were locked in a passionate, sloppy kiss. When it ended and the girl turned to face the camera, Ethan's stomach dropped. It was the same girl he'd asked out just a few days ago. The girl in the video was Chloe Reed, his classmate. Her grades were average, but she was definitely one of the better-looking girls in their year. She had a bubbly personality, and after knowing her for 2 years, Ethan had started to fall for her. On Valentine's Day, just last week, he laid it all on the line and told her how he felt. Chloe's reaction had been lukewarm. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no either. If you could do 10 things for me, whatever I ask, then I'll be your girlfriend. Ethan figured 10 tasks wasn't a big deal, so he'd agreed. The college went on break a few days ago, and Chloe told him she was going on a trip with her best friend. He never expected to see her a few days later, starring in someone else's video. Especially not a video like this, wrapped around another guy. A knot tightened in Ethan's chest, a flicker of disappointment, but that was all. Mostly, he was just relieved. If he'd actually gone through with her 10 demands and become her boyfriend, he'd be walking around with a giant pair of antlers on his head right now. Guess you really can't judge a book by its cover, Ethan muttered to himself, his mood already leveling out. They had never actually dated, so there were no real feelings involved. Whatever crush he'd had on her evaporated the second he saw that video, leaving not even a trace behind. He looked at the age of the man in the video. He had to be old enough to be her father. Ethan just shook his head and let out a dry laugh. Man, my judgment really sucks. The short break flew by, and Ethan's life slipped back into its usual rhythm. When he wasn't in class, he was on the basketball court. He lived for the game and was a starter on the university's team. This afternoon, after a grueling scrimmage, he was sitting on a bench courtside, drenched in sweat, chugging a bottle of water. A slender, petite figure stepped in front of him, blocking the sun. Ethan, it was Chloe's voice, and she sounded annoyed. Ethan lowered his water bottle, but didn't look up. He just grunted a quiet, yeah. Chloe seemed taken aback by his coldness, her brow furrowing slightly. It's been 2 days since the break ended. Not a single call, not one text. She leaned closer, and a cloying, cheap perfume assaulted his senses, making his stomach turn. He remembered she never used to wear perfume. He finally glanced up, and wow, she was wearing a full face of makeup, not too heavy, but not light either. The simple, elegant girl he'd had a crush on was completely gone. What he didn't know was that the perfume was a gift from the esports coach, the cheapest bottle he could find. And the makeup? Renza had made one offhand comment that girls looked sexier with it on, and Chloe had started wearing it ever since. When you were chasing me, you used to call and text all the time. What happened? Not a single call these past few days, she teased, her tone a mix of playful and serious, laced with an undercurrent of accusation, as if he owed her an explanation. Ethan finally lifted his head and looked at her. His expression was completely flat, like he was looking at a stranger. He didn't explain, just offered a single, clipped word. Busy. Sensing his frosty attitude, the smile on Chloe's face faltered for a second before she plastered it back on, adopting a magnanimous, let it slide this time, kind of tone. All right, I get it, you're busy. You're forgiven, she said, digging through the small, designer knockoff chain purse slung over her shoulder. The movement was casual, almost dismissive. Ethan watched her, a sneer playing on his lips. He could already picture it. She'd pull out some small, tacky gift with a foreign brand's logo on it. A peace offering for his days of silence. A little something to placate him. The corner of his mouth twitched in a barely perceptible, deeply sarcastic smile. Like how I want a gift. You come here right off some other guy's mattress, smelling like it, and you think you can toss me a damn charity gift? It's disgusting. But he'd given her too much credit. After fumbling in her bag for a moment, Chloe pulled out not a gift, but a small, crumpled stack of receipts. She pinched the papers between 2 fingers and casually held them out to him. The motion so smooth, it was like she'd rehearsed it. Here, she said, her tone as breezy as a manager giving orders to an intern. This would be the first thing you do for me. I had an amazing time on my trip with my friend. Here are the plane tickets. Can you file these for reimbursement and get the money for me? Just Venmo it to me when you're done. Thud. Ethan literally fell off the bench. He truly hadn't imagined a person could be this shameless. He scrambled to his feet, his head snapping up. He stared in utter disbelief at Chloe's face, at her completely entitled expression that practically screamed, "I'm giving you this opportunity. You should be grateful." She flew across the world to sleep with some guy for free. And now she wants me, the giant sucker, to pay for her travel expenses? Are you fucking kidding me? Being stared at with such intensity made Chloe feel a flicker of unease. She instinctively pulled her hand back a little. What? Why are you looking at me like that? Ethan shot up to his full height, his tall frame instantly casting Chloe in shadow. He didn't even glance at the tickets again. His voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp and final. "I'm done. I'm not interested anymore." Without giving her a moment to react, without a second glance at the shocked expression on her face, he snatched his basketball from the bench and walked away. Chloe was completely stunned. The stack of receipts fluttered from her hand and scattered on the ground. She watched Ethan's retreating back, feeling like he'd become a completely different person. After a few seconds of stunned silence, a wave of indignant fury washed over her. She stomped her foot hard and shrieked at his back. "Ethan, are you insane? You're going to be cheap over a couple of plane tickets? You want to date me? Forget it. You could drop dead. There's a line of guys waiting to date me. I don't need you." Her voice sounded shrill and piercing in the open air of the court. Ethan's pace didn't falter. His back quickly disappeared down the path leading to the dorms. "Unbelievable, completely irrational," she muttered, gritting her teeth. She turned and stormed off the court. In her mind, it was settled. Ethan was just being cheap about the tickets, a total skinflint. A man like that didn't deserve to be her boyfriend. A few days passed, and Chloe's anger subsided. Her roommates had weighed in. You went on an international trip and just asked him to cover the tickets without even getting him a small gift? Anyone would be upset. He's a grown man, acting like a little kid who wants a present. So immature, Chloe retorted, but deep down, she knew she'd gone too far. The main thing was for the past few days, she had actually been expecting Ethan to show up with a gift, begging for her forgiveness. She'd even rehearsed the haughty, reluctant expression she would wear as she graciously gave him another chance. But 2 weeks went by. Not only did Ethan not show up, but she hadn't even seen him around. It was like he was actively avoiding her. A seed of doubt began to sprout in Chloe's mind. A hollow feeling she couldn't quite name, like a creeping vine, began to wrap around her. Before, Ethan was always just there, popping up in her line of sight, chatting with her, joining her for a run. At the time, she hadn't thought much of it. Now that he was suddenly gone, she felt a strange, nagging emptiness, a feeling her girlfriends couldn't fill. It made her anxious, irritable, restless. No, I can't let it end like this. When had Chloe Reed ever had to care about what some guy thought? Who was he to just decide he wasn't interested anymore? Was this some childish game? If anyone was going to end things, it should be her. That afternoon, she found out Ethan had a game on the main court. She changed into a new sundress and applied a fresh, delicate layer of makeup. She practiced her expressions in the mirror. First, she'd be cold, to let him know he was in the wrong. Then once he'd apologized, she could soften up a bit, give him an out. After all, she wasn't an unreasonable person. The basketball court was buzzing with energy. Chloe spotted him immediately, a flash of red and muscle, running, jumping, weaving through the other players. Ethan seemed more focused than ever. Every steal, pass, and shot executed with sharp precision. Sweat soaked his red jersey, clinging to the impressive muscles beneath. The sun caught the hard line of his jaw, revealing a sharp, intense charisma she'd never seen before. He actually is kind of hot. Chloe's heart skipped a beat. She composed herself, waiting for the halftime whistle. When Ethan walked over to the sideline to towel off and grab some water, she made her move, gliding toward him. "Ethan," she called out, her voice deliberately cool. Ethan paused, screwing the cap back on his water bottle. He turned his head and looked at her. His eyes were calm. No surprise, no disgust, not even any real emotion. It was the look you give a casual acquaintance. That look stopped her prepared speech cold. She took a deep breath, fighting to maintain her haughty expression. "It's been days. You should be over by now, right? Getting this worked up over a few plane tickets? Can't you be a little more generous? You're a man, for God's sake. Ethan didn't say anything. He just wiped the sweat from his face with a towel, not even sparing her a glance. His indifference started to get under her skin. Her voice grew sharper. I know you work hard trying to win me over, so your ego is probably bruised. But I never actually promised you anything, did I? Asking you to do a few things to test your sincerity, that's totally normal, isn't it? But you just bailed. No class at all. The more she spoke, the more righteous she felt, her voice rising. Ethan was still silent, just looking at her. But now, his eyes held a hint of amusement, like he was watching a joke unfold. Yes, that was it. He was looking at her like she was a joke. That look unnerved her, and her righteous anger began to deflate. She bit her lower lip, and then, as if making a great sacrifice, she said in a tone dripping with condescension, Fine, fine. You weren't so bad before, so I've changed my mind. She paused, gauging his reaction. Ethan's face was still a blank mask, though one eyebrow twitched almost imperceptibly. Chloe interpreted this as anticipation. A small smirk of satisfaction touched her lips. You don't have to do 10 things anymore. How about 5? She held up 5 slender fingers and waved them in front of his face. Do 5 things for me, and if I'm satisfied, I'll be your girlfriend. How about it? She lifted her chin slightly, waiting for him to look surprised, grateful, or at the very least, relieved. Instead, he laughed. Huh. A short, sharp sound escaped his throat. He shook his head, the disgust in his eyes now thick and undisguised. I'll pass. What? Chloe thought she'd misheard. I said. Ethan's voice was clear and steady, each word a hammer blow to her ego. I'm not interested in you anymore. For real. He picked up his basketball, bouncing in his hand as his gaze shifted back to the court. If you don't have anything else to say, don't bother me again. He took a few steps, then paused and added, his tone as flat as if he were stating a fact. You're wasting my time. With that, he turned and jogged back onto the court, rejoining the game without a second glance at the girl frozen in place. Ethan? Chloe was trembling with rage. The rest of her words stuck in her throat. A wave of pure humiliation washed over her. She watched his back as he ran, sweated, and played as if she didn't even exist. For the first time in her life, she knew what it felt like to be completely and utterly ignored. A furious heat shot through her. She stomped her foot and screamed at his retreating figure. Fine. Ethan, you've got guts. You'd better not regret this. For you, I gave up my idol. I gave up so many opportunities. You just wait. Next time you come crawling back to me, I won't even spit in your direction. Her voice was shrill in the noisy arena, drawing a few curious stares. Chloe suddenly felt the weight of her outburst. Her face flushed crimson. She covered her face with her hands and ran. Being publicly humiliated by Ethan made her question her own appeal. For days, she couldn't eat or sleep. She couldn't even enjoy her favorite game anymore. It was because of that game that she'd met Renza. Years ago, when Chloe was just a teenager, Renza was still a pro player. His skills and game sense were incredible, and as a devoted fan of the game, she idolized him. She'd left a comment on his page once, and he'd actually replied. They added each other on WhatsApp, and they've been in touch ever since. Her college break had happened to fall during his birthday, so Chloe had flown thousands of miles to celebrate with him. That night after dinner, one thing had led to another. After spending a few days with him, she had come back ready to finally accept Ethan's advances. To be honest, she didn't mind Ethan. He was tall, good-looking, and had a decent personality. It was just that his family was average, middle class, a far cry from the life she wanted. But now, after what had happened, she figured she could let Ethan have his chance. But Ethan's attitude had completely changed. Every time he saw her, his eyes held an expression she couldn't quite decipher, somewhere between disgust and revulsion. She cursed him over and over in her head, calling him ungrateful, petty, and narrow-minded, swearing she would make him regret it. She needed comfort. She needed to prove her charm was still potent. She opened the encrypted messaging app again. Renza's profile picture was active. Hey, she typed, followed by a sad face emoji. Almost instantly, his reply popped up. Babe, I miss you like crazy. Why haven't you messaged me? Is that boring guy still bothering you? The text was punctuated with a kissy face emoji. Seeing the affectionate nickname and concerned questions on the screen, The frustration Ethan had caused seemed to melt away. Of course, only someone as dazzling and appreciative as Rinza was worthy of her. Her fingers flew across the screen as she poured out all her grievances from the past few days. Naturally, she omitted the real reason for Ethan's rejection, painting him instead as a bitter loser who was lashing out because she wouldn't date him. Rinza's sweet talk flowed freely, and Chloe's spirits soared, the sting of her recent failure replaced by a diluted sense of satisfaction. Their chat grew more and more heated, falling back into the same flirty, intense vibe they'd had during her trip. "Babe, I have amazing news." Rinza suddenly sent a voice message, his tone ecstatic. "Next week, my entire family is coming to the U.S. for a vacation. My mom, dad, brother, and my son who just turned 18. We're planning to hit a few big cities, and you're the first person I thought of." Chloe's heart leaped. His whole family? Really? That's amazing, she typed back immediately, her mind racing. Rinza's family. Didn't that mean that as his only friend in the country, she would have to arrange a lavish welcome dinner? Of course it did. But she hadn't gotten that reimbursement for her plane tickets, and money was a little tight. "Of course it's real, my Easter goddess." Rinza's voice message was full of laughter. "You'd better be ready to play host. We don't know our way around, so we're counting on you. I can't wait to introduce you to my family." "Don't worry." Without a second thought, Chloe's fingers had already typed out the promise. "Leave it to me. I'll arrange everything. You guys are going to have the best time." Putting her phone down, the smile vanished from Chloe's face. Arranging meals and entertainment for them. How much would that cost? The excitement from their chat faded, and the silence of her dorm room crept back in. Her eyes drifted unconsciously to her phone screen. The familiar chat window belonging to Ethan was still buried at the bottom of her list. He's really just ignoring me. He hasn't tried to contact me once in all this time. Not even an apology. The nerve. How dare he? Could it be that he really doesn't care anymore? The thought was a needle, pricking her heart unexpectedly. No, impossible. He chased me for so long. How could he just give up like that? He's faking it. It's a tactic to make me want him more. Yes, that has to be it. Chloe shot up in bed. She smoothed her messy hair in the mirror, her eyes hardening with renewed determination. "All right, Ethan Cole, you're playing dirty. I'll give you one more chance. One last chance. Let's see how long you can keep up this act." A few days later, after carefully dressing up, Chloe appeared before Ethan once again. This time, she didn't go to the basketball court. She coincidentally ran into him on the path he always took after class. "Ethan," she called out, forcing what she hoped was a sweet, slightly shy smile onto her face. Her eyes were full of a clear, "I forgive you" message. Ethan stopped. He looked at her, his gaze still devoid of any warmth. It wasn't even a way you'd look at a classmate. His stare made her nervous, and the opening line she prepared got stuck in her throat. It finally came out in a sudden, awkward rush. "I've thought it over." Ethan didn't reply, just tilted his chin slightly, prompting her to continue. "You don't have to do anything for me." Chloe blurted out, taking a deep breath. "The 10 things, the 5 things, forget it. It's all canceled." She paused, gathered her courage, and looked him straight in the eye. "Ethan Cole, I'm saying yes right now. I'll be your girlfriend." After the words were out, her heart pounded in her chest, and she could feel her cheeks flush. She lowered her gaze, feigning shyness, and waited. She waited for his ecstatic reaction, for his excited embrace, for his stammering words of gratitude and promises. 1 second, 2 seconds. 2 minutes passed. The only sound was the rustling of leaves in the wind. Chloe couldn't resist peeking through her eyelashes at Ethan. The explosion of joy she'd expected wasn't there. In fact, his expression hadn't changed at all. He was just looking at her, the corners of his mouth slowly, deliberately, pulling up into a cold, deeply ironic smile. The way he was smiling at her sent a chill down her spine. A terrible premonition began to bloom in her chest. Ethan finally let out a soft chuckle. "Chloe, what is this? A fire sale? A final clearance?" His voice was quiet, but every word was crystal clear, dripping with sarcasm and ridicule. "I was trying to let you save some face, but you just keep coming back for more, don't you?" Ethan shook his head, a slight frown creasing his brow. "Do you really think I'm that much of a simp? That I'm some kind of recycling bin for any piece of trash? What did you say? Chloe's jaw dropped, her voice trembling with a guilty conscience. She knew exactly what he meant by trash, but she was sure there was no way Ethan could know about what happened overseas. Ethan, that's horrible. How can you insult me like that? Insult you? Ethan scoffed, his eyes full of contempt. I'm just stating a fact. He pulled his phone from his pocket, unlocked it, and with a few quick swipes, opened a web page. Then, he thrust the phone right at her face. On the screen was a scene that was horribly familiar, a scene that made her blood run cold. The dimly lit hotel room, the shaky camera, Renz's smug, smiling face, and her. She was disheveled, held tightly in Renz's arms, being kissed aggressively. The camera had clearly captured the dazed look in her eyes, her welcoming posture, and the thick, choker-style chain, like a dog collar, hanging loosely around her neck. That's not me, she denied instinctively, but her hands, which were reaching to snatch the phone, her deathly pale face, and the violent trembling of her body betrayed her. Of course she remembered the video. Renza had said he wanted a souvenir. She had thought it was exciting and romantic, so she'd agreed. She never, ever thought. Not you. Looks exactly like you. Wearing the same collar. Don't think I can't recognize you just because you're in a bathrobe. That. Foreigners are just more passionate. It's part of their etiquette. That's it, their etiquette. Chloe was stammering, grasping at a pathetic excuse. The last part was clearly her trying to convince herself. What country's etiquette involves making out instead of a kiss on the cheek? Ethan's gaze was fixed on her pale face. What country's etiquette requires you to wear a bathrobe? Or a dog collar? Like some kind of pet? Oh, all right, he said, as if suddenly remembering something. The sarcasm in his smile deepened as he quoted the proud caption from Renz's video. He said you gave him everything on the first date. Wow, Chloe, you really make it easy, don't you? Enough, stop it. Before Ethan could finish, Chloe let out a piercing scream. She clamped her hands over her ears. That was, utter panic made her incoherent. She stammered for a moment before landing on a flimsy lie. He drugged me at dinner. He had me under his control. I didn't know what was happening. I'm not that kind of person. Ethan, you have to believe me. I'm really not. Sob. She broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. Ethan just watched her hysterical performance, watched the tears and snot stream down her face as she tried to lie her way out. His expression was that of someone watching a bizarre, pathetic clown. There was no anger, no pity, just the detached indifference of someone who has seen the absolute truth. But he waited for her sobs to quiet down a little before he spoke again, his voice flat and devoid of any emotion. What does that have to do with me? Did someone force you to fly halfway across the world to deliver yourself to his door? Did someone force you to have dinner with him? If you don't give a guy an opportunity, how's he supposed to take one? Chloe's crying stopped abruptly. She looked up, her tear-streaked face a mask of disbelief. When had he become so cold, so cruel? Ethan shrugged, a completely detached, not my problem look on his face. You don't have to explain it to me. What kind of person you are has nothing to do with me. He pocketed his phone. Without another glance at the broken girl collapsed on the ground, he turned and walked away. It wasn't until Ethan's back had completely disappeared from view that Chloe finally crumpled, all the strength draining from her body as she collapsed onto the cold pavement. Tears flowed silently as she shivered uncontrollably. He posted it on social media. She whispered to herself in a daze. Is he trying to ruin me? He wants to destroy my life. She covered her face, her muffled, desperate sobs echoing softly on the empty path. From that day on, it was like Chloe became a different person. The veil Ethan had so brutally ripped away seemed to have taken all her pride and self-respect with it. The colder he was, the more he treated her like she was invisible, the more a twisted, desperate flame burned inside her. She stubbornly believed that if she just tried hard enough, if she was humble enough, she could win back the boy who once looked at her with admiration. And so, Chloe's shadow began to appear everywhere in Ethan's life. At lunch, he'd walk into the dining hall after practice, and she'd already be there at his usual table with a tray of food waiting, all his favorite dishes. Ethan, I got you lunch, she'd say, her voice dripping with a forced gentleness, a pained smile on her face. Ethan would walk right past the table without a single glance, get in line, and buy his own food. The tray Chloe had prepared would sit there, abandoned, until a janitor cleared it away. In the afternoon, at the basketball court, Ethan would be playing his heart out with his teammates. During a break, he'd head to the bench for his water. A new, ice-cold bottle of water would already be sitting next to his gym bag. Chloe would be standing a few feet away, watching him anxiously. Ethan would pick up his own water bottle, take a few swigs, then glance at the one she'd brought. He'd walk over, pick it up without a word, and sink it perfectly into a trash can from 10 feet away. Then he'd turn and walk back to the court, leaving Chloe frozen on the sideline, her face burning with humiliation as other players snickered. When it rained, a new umbrella would mysteriously appear by his classroom door. The next day, it would be in the campus lost and found. In the study hall, she would carefully sit at a table diagonally across from him and try to start conversation. The only response she'd get was the sound of him turning a page, or him simply getting up and leaving. "Stop bringing me things." One day, outside the library, Chloe tried to hand him a container of washed fruit. This time, Ethan finally stopped. He didn't look at her, but his voice was low and clear, cutting through the sound of the rain with an undeniable tone of revulsion. "I find it dirty." 3 words, 3 red-hot needles stabbing straight in her heart. She flinched, the container of fruit nearly slipping from her grasp. Ethan finally turned his gaze on her. His eyes were cold, sharp, and utterly devoid of warmth. "And stop following me around," he continued, the corner of his mouth twisting into a smile that held no humor. "People might get the wrong idea and think I have a girlfriend." He opened his own umbrella and was about to leave when Chloe called out to him. Her voice was barely a whisper, her face a mask of embarrassment. "Wait, what is it?" Ethan's tone was impatient. Can I borrow some money? I already told you, I'm not doing your tasks, and I'm not chasing you. So no, I'm not lending you any money." Before Chloe could say another word, Ethan had disappeared into the rain. That night, after a barrage of sweet talk from Rinza, Chloe forgave him for the video leak. A week later, Rinza called. In a tone that suggested it was the most natural thing in the world, he informed her that he, his father, his brother, and his recently-of-age son had arrived in the city. His wife and mother had gone shopping, and he needed her to come to the hotel immediately to arrange dinner. Chloe agreed almost instantly. She needed to prove she was still desirable, still wanted, especially after being so thoroughly rejected by Ethan. In the hotel suite, the atmosphere was strange. Rinza's father, a quiet old man with vacant eyes, sat in a corner. His brother was hyperactive, his eyes constantly darting over her body. And his son, barely an adult, stared at her with the undisguised, predatory curiosity of a wild animal. Chloe pushed down her unease and forced a smile as she made dinner arrangements. Throughout the evening, Rinza's family kept pressuring her to drink, offering clumsy compliments while their eyes crawled all over her. She couldn't refuse, and after a few glasses, she felt dizzy and hot, her consciousness starting to blur. The next morning, harsh sunlight pried her eyes open. Her head was pounding from the alcohol, and as she stretched, she realized her whole body ached. There was a sticky, disgusting feeling on her skin and a deep, soul-crushing exhaustion. A terrible feeling jolted her fully awake. She was staring at an unfamiliar hotel ceiling. The air was thick with the foul, cloying stench of alcohol, sweat, and something else. A rank, musky odor she now recognized as the distinct body odor of the men in the room. When her eyes focused on the other people in the room, her brain shut down. She wasn't alone. Rinza's father, brother, and son were all there. They were scattered around the room, half-dressed, staring at her naked body with looks of smug satisfaction. "Eh-aha!" A scream, so shrill it barely sounded human, shattered the morning silence. Chloe yanked the covers around herself, curling into a tight ball. "Get out! Get out! You animals! You're all animals!" she shrieked hysterically, her voice raw and broken. Rinza walked in, a look of annoyance on his face. "What's with all the noise so early?" He walked to the bed and looked down at the sobbing girl, his eyes holding not a shred of remorse, only a smug sense of control. "Come on, babe, don't be like that. You had a great time last night, didn't you? We were just getting to know each other better. See, my family loves you. He reached out to touch her face. "Don't touch me." Chloe flinched away, her eyes full of venom. Rinza shrugged. "You're the one who got wasted last night and wouldn't let us go," he said flippantly. "Now, pull yourself together. We've got plans today. Be a good girl." He leaned down, cooing at her in his heavily accented English, like he was calming a disobedient pet. When she still didn't move, the act dropped. He stood up straight and slapped her hard across the face. No one else in the room moved to stop him. They just watched her with contempt. "You're a whore who flies halfway across the world to spread her legs for a guy she just met. And now you're pretending to be a saint?" Rinza sneered, waving his phone in her face. "Want to see a replay of your performance last night?" Fear finally overwhelmed her anger and shame. Like a broken doll, caught between his threats and his false promises, she slowly stopped crying. She numbly got dressed and followed the family out of the hotel. The sun was bright outside, but she felt no warmth at all, just a bone-deep chill, like a zombie walking among the living. A few days later, on a sunny weekend, the public basketball courts near the university were packed. Ethan and his teammates were in the middle of a heated half-court game. Chloe was there. She stood in the shade of a tree at the edge of the court, holding a bottle of ice water. Her face was pale, with dark circles under her eyes. It was obvious the past few days had been hell. The things that had happened were a living nightmare, leaving her in a state of numb despair. Seeing Ethan now, his energy, his easy smile, it all seemed so precious, something she'd never noticed before. She hesitated, not daring to approach. The memory of his cold, disgusted eyes and his cutting words, "I find you dirty," still made her flinch. Then, by a cruel twist of fate, Rinza and his family appeared. They seemed to be just passing by, but stopped to watch the game. Rinza spotted Chloe in the shade almost immediately. He followed her gaze and saw him, the tall, athletic player who stood out from the crowd, Ethan. Rinza's brow furrowed. Chloe had been cold and resistant toward him for days, her eyes filled with a dead, resentful look that infuriated him. But now, she was looking at another man with a complex expression he had never seen before. A possessive, violent jealousy exploded in Rinza's mind. Ever since he'd met Chloe, he'd felt a sense of superiority here. He strode over to her, snaked an arm around her waist, and in a gesture of blatant ownership, pulled her toward the court where Ethan was playing. Chloe stiffened at his sudden touch, instinctively trying to pull away, but Rinza's arm was like an iron clamp. "Hey, you!" Rinza shouted in loud, broken English, successfully grabbing the attention of everyone on the court, including Ethan, who had just sunk a perfect three-pointer. Ethan turned, his expression calm as he took in the bizarre family and the pale, trapped-looking Chloe. He recognized Rinza immediately from the video. "Is this your girlfriend?" Rinza pointed at Chloe, a contemptuous, taunting smile on his face. He deliberately raised his voice so everyone could hear. He gave Chloe's waist a malicious squeeze. "She was keeping me company in my hotel room just a few days ago. Very enthusiastic. Very good." Rinza's words were choppy, but his meaning was poisonously clear. He gave a thumbs-down gesture. "So easy. Are all you American girls like this? So eager. So open. Ha." That last sentence was a match thrown into a barrel of gasoline. It ignited the fury of Ethan and every single one of his teammates. Ethan hadn't planned on engaging. Chloe had never been his girlfriend, so who she slept with was none of his business. He could ignore her pathetic attempts to get his attention, and he could ignore a scumbag like Rinza. But he could not stand by while this piece of trash from a half-dead country insulted every woman on this campus, every woman in this country, all because of one girl's pathetic choices. "What the fuck did you just say?" one of his hot-headed teammates yelled. Ethan didn't say a word. He just walked straight toward Rinza. His tall frame cast a shadow over the smaller man. Even so, Rinza didn't flinch. He didn't believe this kid would dare to touch him. Crack! A loud smack echoed across the court, followed by the wet sound of spraying blood. Rinza's body lifted off the ground and flew several feet before landing in a heap on the pavement. Before he could even hit the ground, Ethan's teammates were on him, a swarming mass of muscle and fury, each one trying to get a piece. In seconds, Rinza and his family were swallowed by the mob. "Fucking foreign trash. You came here to die. We're gonna beat you so bad your own mothers won't recognize you. Get the others too. They're all scum." A group of college athletes, all over 6 feet tall and built like tanks, could do serious damage. Stop! Stop fighting! Security! Somebody call security, a bystander shouted, trying to intervene. Soon, a few uniformed park security guards came running, armed with batons and riot forks. They pushed into the crowd, but they didn't immediately try to stop the students. When they learned what had happened, they seemed to intentionally get in the way of Renz's family members who were trying to escape, while accidentally kicking a few dropped batons toward Ethan and his friends. "What's going on here? Break it up!" The lead guard yelled for show, but he made eye contact with Ethan and gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. He then turned to his men. "Johnson, Miller, over here. I think there's another disturbance over there. Let's go check it out." With that, he and two of his guards hurried off toward the other side of the park, leaving two behind to maintain order, which really meant making sure Renz's family couldn't run. This silent approval was like gasoline on the fire. Now armed, the basketball team went berserk. Batons whistled through the air and landed with sickening thuds. "Art, help! We're sorry, stop, please!" Their pathetic screams echoed across the court. 3 hours later, when the last of their energy was spent, the dozen or so students finally stopped. Renza and his family were 4 broken heaps on the ground, bruised, bloody, and barely conscious. Splash! Someone dumped a few buckets of cold water on them. They twitched and coughed, groaning in pain. "Still making noise, huh?" One of the players panted, raising his baton again. "The cops are here!" someone shouted from the edge of the crowd. The wail of sirens grew louder, and several police cars pulled up to the court, their lights flashing. Officers quickly swarmed the scene. "What happened here?" the lead officer asked, his brow furrowed as he looked at the 4 horrifically beaten foreigners on the ground. "Officer," Ethan stepped forward, his voice loud and clear. "They were publicly harassing and insulting women. Their language was disgusting. They sexually assaulted one of our classmates and then started a fight. We were defending ourselves." He pointed at Chloe, who was standing nearby, pale and shaking. "She's a witness and a victim." Assault? The officer's expression hardened. Hearing that word, Renza, who had been lying on the ground like a dead dog, suddenly stirred. His eyes, swollen to slits, shot open with terror. He started shouting something incoherent in his native language, trying to reach into his pocket. A bilingual officer understood. He was saying he had video proof she was willing. An officer immediately searched Renza's pockets and pulled out his phone. A tech expert quickly unlocked it and found several video files. The content was stomach-churning. There were the clips Ethan had already seen, but there were also new ones from the hotel, showing Chloe in compromising situations with Renza's entire family. In the videos, her eyes were glazed over, but her actions seemed consensual. There was no clear evidence of force. "If it's not assault, it's public indecency and disturbing the peace," the officer finally declared, his voice filled with contempt. "Take them all away. 15 days in lockup, then deport them." Deport. Hearing that word was like an electric shock. Renza, who had been half dead, shot up, his swollen face a mask of pure terror. "No, you can't deport us. Please, sir, we're sorry. We'll pay a fine. Any amount. You can't deport us." His father, brother, and son also scrambled to their knees, ignoring their injuries, and started begging, their words a garbled mix of broken English and their own language. "Please, have mercy. We can't go back. We'll be killed. They'll kill us." The military conscription in their home country was brutal, especially now that it was engulfed in war. As a well-known esports coach, Renza had been granted an exemption. If he were deported for something as disgraceful as public lewdness and assault, not only would his career be over, but his exemption would be revoked instantly. He'd be sent straight to the most dangerous front lines. It was a death sentence. But this wasn't a marketplace where they could bargain. The police cars drove away, their lights flashing, leaving behind a trashed basketball court and a crowd of silent students. The story of the violent brawl and the subsequent public indecency case involving foreign nationals blew up online. Chloe was infamous. Walking across campus, she could feel the stares, hear the whispers. That's her. You'd never know it. She always acted so innocent. With a whole family. Ugh, so gross. I heard she has. You know, why hasn't the university expelled trash like her yet? Her roommate had already moved out. Students in her dorm avoided her like the plague. The dean called her in for a meeting, his voice cold as he informed her that the university was reviewing her case and that she should prepare for the consequences. Under the immense stress, her body began to fail. A persistent itching and burning sensation became unbearable, accompanied by an abnormal discharge. She was too scared to go to the campus health center. During a school holiday, she took a taxi to a small, private clinic in a remote part of the city. She walked out of the clinic that afternoon, her face ashen. The lab report in her hand slipped from her fingers and fluttered to the ground. She didn't even notice, just kept walking like a zombie. A mother walking with her child saw the paper. The little boy ran over, picked it up, and started reading it aloud. Test result: positive, high-risk HPV infection. Mommy, what do these other big words say? The mother snatched the paper from his hand, threw it down, and frantically dragged her son away to wash his hands. Finally, the university's decision came down. For violating the student code of conduct, Chloe Reed was expelled. When she moved out of her dorm, no one came to say goodbye. For Renza and his family, 15 days in jail felt like 15 years. The cramped cell, the cold concrete floor, the inedible food, and the contemptuous glares from the other inmates. Every day was a living hell. Their arrogant sense of superiority had been shattered, replaced by a paralyzing fear of the future. When the heavy iron gates of the detention center finally opened, the 4 men who stumbled out into the blinding sunlight looked like ghosts. There was no joy on their faces, only a deep, hollow despair. A guard shoved their meager belongings at them and said coldly, "You're free to go. Remember, you've been classified as undesirable aliens. You are to leave the country immediately. The official deportation order will be sent to your embassy." Leave the country. Deportation. The words were a death knell. Renza tried his old flip phone, but he couldn't reach his wife or mother. After they heard about the arrest and the scandal went viral, they had given up all hope. They sold what little they had and, with the help of some fellow expatriates, found work in a seedy nightclub in another country. The day of the deportation arrived. Renza, his father, his brother, and his son were like 4 walking corpses, escorted by 2 immigration officers through the international terminal. They were still wearing the same filthy clothes from their time in jail. They reeked. Their faces were gaunt, their eyes empty, their bodies still covered in bruises. As they approached the security checkpoint, a figure darted out from the side like an apparition. It was Chloe. "Renza, you bastard, go to hell. Shink, shink, shink." She was screaming, feral, plunging a knife into him with all her strength. 1, 2, 3 times, a dozen times. Renza didn't even have time to scream. His eyes bulged, and his body convulsed violently as he was turned into a human pincushion in a matter of seconds. His father, brother, and son collapsed to the floor in terror, soiling themselves, too scared to even run. When airport security and the immigration officers finally managed to pull Chloe off, Renza was already dead. The news that Chloe Reed had been sentenced to death for first-degree murder spread across campus the same day. Ethan was in the gym with his teammates, running drills. No one talked about it. It was just another news story that had nothing to do with them. Someone passed the ball to Ethan. He jumped, his wrist flicking gracefully. The basketball traced a perfect arc through the air and dropped cleanly through the net. A few days later, in her cell on death row, Chloe Reed used her last bit of strength to slam her head against the cold, concrete wall, ending her own life. The day after Renza's father, brother, and son were forcibly repatriated, they were met at their home country's airport not by family, but by armed military police. They were thrown onto a truck headed for the front lines. The army was desperate for fresh bodies. They were given less than a week of basic training, just enough to learn how to pull a trigger before being sent to plug a gap in a collapsing front in the east. 2 weeks later, their entire battalion was wiped out in a surprise enemy offensive. All prisoners taken, as retribution for war crimes their unit had committed in occupied territories, were executed by sledgehammer. A fierce inter-university basketball game had just ended. Ethan's team won. The cheers from the stands were dying down as the crowd began to file out. Ethan sat on the bench, catching his breath. He picked up his bottle and realized it was empty. "Here." A soft voice. Ethan turned his head. A bottle of water was being offered to him. A pretty girl was smiling at him, a little shyly. He took the water with a wide, easy grin. Thanks. The girl nodded, her smile brightening. You're welcome.